Hello, everyone. Welcome to this ongoing series of conversations organized by the Turkish presidency. My name is Adeshawa Josh, and you're welcome to the panel titled Equality in a Fairer World, Where Africa Stands and What the Future Holds, and the role Turkey is playing to advance the advocacy of a much better world. I have with me today on this panel three very wonderful guests. Quinta Mbori, who is a gender equality advocate and first president of the Standard Group Women Network. She joins me from Nairobi. And I also have Yusuf Erim, who is TRT World Editor-at-Large and Turkish foreign policy expert. And I also have with me Sulaiman Alade, who is a global affairs analyst, editor-at-large, and strategic media and communications consultant. He joins us from Lagos. Yusuf Erim is also joining us from Istanbul. I just want to quickly paint a background about the topic and why we're even having this conversation in the first place. For a fairer world and a more just world, this very world that we both exist in, all of us, needs Africa, and Africa needs the world in order to activate and achieve a fair and just global governance, economic growth, adequately counter the devastating effects of climate change, improve tech innovations, or even human and social development. Because our world would be a better place with the continent playing a key role because it has 40% of the world's workforce, which is projected to be there by 2050. Africa also has a young population, thriving urban and innovative centers, abundant natural resources, the world's fastest growing economy, and some of the most resourceful human capital in the world. What's more, the continent's geopolitical importance is growing by the day, and its role in the international arena is becoming stronger, thanks to political and economic integration. Now, a fairer world, whatever that is, with Africa participating equally in it, will look very different from what it is currently. Turkey has been at the forefront of a similar advocacy, challenging the current world order and systems with the idea that the world is actually bigger than five, and calling for a more representative United Nations that reflects the progress in the international community and among nation states that has been made since the Second World War. Don't forget, I started by saying Africa needs the world and that the world needs Africa. If that's anything to go by, then the extent to which the continent realizes its goals of the equality that it has always wanted will be determined by the quality of its partnerships. So I am going to start this conversation with the woman in your midst, the one and only, Quinta Mbori, because what is equality without women having their place in it, right? I've already introduced her, and I guess my question would be to ask her as a woman, what is your assessment of the current world order and the commitment that the world continues to say they're committed to equality and justice?
Thank you so much, Dewa, and of course, it's good to see you. You're looking very lovely from Turkey. Anyway, thank you for the introduction and of course for having this timely discussion. What is a fair world? A fair world is a world that has a level playground for everyone, where everyone is treated equally and they have equal access to resources, they have equal access to opportunities. And where equality is not possible, then we talk about equity, where we create a level playing ground, create an opportunity to ensure that the obstacles that stand in the way of one gender are actually leveled in order for them to compete effectively. Now, back to your question, when you talk about a fair world, and really is the world committed to equality and justice. Of course, we've seen a lot of initiatives that the world is undertaking in terms of trying or attempting to create a world that is equal and fair and just to everyone. Several initiatives have come up, several charters have been signed up. We have, African Union, just when I come close to possibly what's happening in Africa, we even have treaties like the East Africa Community. Many other things are going on, many other activities. In fact, the world, as we see it, is really doing its best to ensure that we are able to enjoy equality in this generation. But I'll probably just pick on one, which in my experience, my experience as a media practitioner or a journalist, I have always made a point of reference to, and that is the Sustainable Development Agenda, which was adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015. And they decided to set a 2030 deadline for the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, and of course, all the other sustainable development goals, calling the world to action, to end poverty, to protect the planet, to improve lives, to reduce poverty, and so on and so forth. So, of course, the intention is there, but I think the big question is, how are we doing? How are we faring? Are we on track, or are there things that we need to, do we need to hasten our steps? Do we need to improve? So I have seen a lot of, since say the World War II, I've seen a lot of, governments, not just in Africa, but globally, trying to have working structures for their countries, coming up with laws and policies, coming up with I would call it, social goals to ensure that at least we are able to experience justice and equality. Right. So my long and short answer is this: yes, there is the world has good intentions, Africa has good intentions, but I feel like the progress is a bit too slow, because when you're talking about Sustainable Development Agenda and goals, we had a deadline of 2030, and we are probably just a few years short of that. Right. But looking at the current space, I think what we need to ask ourselves is, are we really going to experience a fair world in this generation?
Sulaiman Alade, let me bring you in here. And she's helped me ask my question, which is, what is working, what isn't working, and is it even possible a fair world?
Well, I think, once again, thanks everyone. I think it's possible, but the drawback has to do with some cultural influences, which we really can't run away from as Africans. And these also come in two folds, our belief system and our religion, to the extent that we have a problem in understanding what equality means. And if you look at it, for instance, for those who are the two most followed religions on the continent, specifically Nigeria, Islam and Christianity, they speak well about women in the books. They speak well about equality and justice in the books. But again, the adherents, again, when they go out of the books, they actually say something quite, contrary. And that is where we have a problem, to the extent we've seen time wars. We can't find women like yourself and Quentin to be on a show like this, because if I'm from a family of, let's say, a mixed male and female, and there's a problem in the family in terms of resources to push some form of education for the children, back then, the female is asked to stand down for the male child to go ahead in school. And again, it comes back to our beliefs, to the extent that they also saw this patriarchal system, which ultimately hasn't worked well. And why did I mention the religion? For instance, Islam, which I'm very familiar with, tells me that the woman is as equal as a man. In fact, the woman is so well placed to the extent that a whole chapter in the Quran is named after, a woman. But the same people who practice this, don't forget, are the same people we find in our social space, in our, our political space, in our, corporate environment. So unconsciously or consciously, they bring to bear these inequality in the practice of what they do. And that is why I say, for those who have been able to purge themselves out of that thinking, out of that ideology of thinking that a particular sex or individual is quite more, superior than the other, will actually not get us where we are headed until we understand that what's in the book shouldn't be different from what we believe. Yes, because already the books.
Sulaiman, let me quickly come in here. You have raised a very off the book point. And before I come to you, Yusuf, I want to quickly ask a follow-up question with Sulaiman. You have painted what I call, the differential factor when it comes to what the principle is and what is playing out. And you made mention of an important point about within ourselves. Do you think this limitation, this cultural influence and belief system that is at war with each other is what is perhaps one of the factors that is preventing Africa within itself from attaining that fairness it really, really wants to achieve? Or is this factor across the board, which means it's happening within us, and that system is also preventing Africa from finding an equal playing field within the international system?
Well, by all means, because I've actually done some, periphery studies, and I've also read what some psychologists have also said. We think in our language, we think in our mother tongue, we think in our cultural processes, and it's the same thinking sometimes that ultimately comes to the fore unconsciously. So until we start having, because by now we've started seeing parents who have started letting people know. I'll give you an instance.
We're having a bit of technical problems with Sulaiman Alde. As soon as you can join us back, let us know. I'll just quickly direct my next question to you, Yusuf.
So you have a male child. You have a male child. Yeah.
We lost you
can you hear me?
Go on.
Yeah, yes. You have a male child, they go, oh, you're a man. And you have a female child that says, oh my God, why did you allow your wife to beat you? It sounds comical, but it's actually derogatory. And it is from that same idea we have. It starts from the home. If I had sisters, and if growing up, chores were apportioned based on our sexuality, our gender, I will grow up into that space. And it is the same way I'll grow up into my corporate environment. And as you try as much as possible to have a program like this, to take this whole idea out of my space, out of my psyche, it becomes almost impossible, because I've grown over the years to think that this is the way it should go. So we need a new generation of Africans who start seeing the equality of
who
we are. And now what I'm trying to say is that we must consciously try to create a new, generation of Africans who see everyone as equal, who see everyone as equal player, who see everyone irrespective of your sex, that there are no tasks or no jobs that are apportioned on sex or gender basis. If we can't start by now, trust me, it's going to take a whole long for us to purge this out of our psyche, because even the religion haven't helped us, fare better.
Right. I'll come back to you later, Sulaiman. Let me quickly go to Yusuf Erim, who I'm going to ask about the current world order. Okay, we're talking about the internal workings of what fairness looks like within Africa. And they say that charity begins from home, doesn't it? So, but I want to take it beyond Africa now. And I'm going to ask you, is the current world order a reflection of the progress that we've made since the Second World War? If not, what needs to change?
A little bit yes, and a little bit no. I think the current world order right now is basically a small group clinging on to the power that they have, to the diminishing power that they have. Greek philosopher Heraclitus said it best that the only thing constant in life is change. Now, we went from a period of the 1940s, 1950s when change happened in decades, to a period in the 80s and 90s when change happened over years, to now in the new millennium where change happens in months and sometimes weeks. So to think that a world order that was created 80 years ago is suitable to govern and bring justice in a great many fields is still relevant is foolish thinking. And there's been very little done to update this system or to amend this system. Now, as my colleague said that we need a new generation of Africans to push equality, to push social justice. I think we need a new generation of global leaders, and we need a new generation of Westerners to be able to grasp the need for equality, grasp the need for more representation in all of our global institutions. Now, to think that, well, first thing, I think what's very important is to have everyone change their view of Africa. The optics that are in the mind or in the background of any Western politician, any Western analyst, that's an 80s, 90s, maybe year 2000 thinking. The world has changed. You know, when the United Nations was formed first, there was 4 African nations that were member states. Now there's over 50 African nations that are member states, but there's still not an African nation on the Security Council. Why? Why, when you have 50 member states from a continent that not one person represents, or one country represents the continent on the Security Council, the most important platform where the most important decisions are reached on a global level for the United Nations. So being able to run forward diplomatically without Africa is basically running with one leg tied behind your back. And that's very important. And we're seeing many countries revise, rethink, reset their relations with Africa for the next 20, 30, 40 years. We're seeing Turkey, we're seeing China, we're seeing many Eastern countries, countries in the global South create new strategies and a new approach towards Africa. And I think in the coming couple of decades, those countries will be big winners, because to look at Africa as just some type of continent that you just provide development to or aid to, that's 30, 40 years ago. That's 30, 40 years ago. As you stated, Africa has a tremendous human resource. It's a tremendous market. It's the quickest growing market. And to be able to do better business with Africa, to be able to move forward with Africa, you need equal symmetric partnerships. This is not the way that, I don't want to call single countries out, but just as an example, not the way the French have done their relationships in the past, not the way the United States has done their relationship, or the UK. You really need a partnership going forward. You really need to be able to create, and I know it's a very cliche word, but you really need to be able to create win-win situations going forward. And the old world order is not doing that. Now, we've entered a period where the multipolar system is coming, regardless of how much you try to stop it. Any single country or any group of countries does not have the power to stop what's coming. And what's coming is a multipolar world, a world that will have more than one superpower deciding what happens, and also many regional powers that will have a very important say inside that global order. Regional powers like Turkey, like India, like Poland, like Nigeria, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico. These are all going to be very, very important countries going forward. They're all countries on the rise. And to have a proper global order that is just going forward, you're going to have to let in some of these regional powers into the decision-making apparatus inside the United Nations, inside the World Trade Organization, inside of the World Health Organization, because the traditional five power brokers, they just don't have the representation anymore to be able to decide on how humanity moves forward. And I think that this is a very important conversation, but the major roadblock of this conversation is that many of the power brokers that are making these decisions will have to relinquish power. They'll have to relinquish power, and that really stops it.
Yeah, and you definitely know, and all of us here know, the relinquishing power in politics, especially in the global space, is something that does not happen. We know how the United Nations came about. We know how important international global organizations came about, and particularly the United Nations. It was after bloodshed, war, major changes in the international society occurred after major, either, war or something of that nature. Okay. So my question would be, for this representation that you're talking about to happen, in the absence of war, because the world does not want to go to war, and we shouldn't even be talking about that right now, what should the process of change look like? Because people have tried diplomacy, they've tried having conversations about this. African countries, I wouldn't say they've threatened, but they have been very vocal about it. I saw somewhere some African leaders were saying, we would not be at the United Nations General Assembly the next time if we don't begin to talk actively about joining, about how we are going to join, become a member of the Security Council, at the very least one of us. And these conversations have taken long enough. Individual countries, I don't want to mention names, have said that, they support the idea that African countries should join. But you and I, all of us know the words are not enough. That in international politics, the real words are actions. So my question again would be, what should the processes that will lead to change look like? Not in a particular order, like the combination of it, because diplomacy is now the instrument of change in our generation. It's no longer war. It's no longer, throwing bombs at each other. But this diplomacy, which is supposed to work, is not working as fast as it should be. What will the process of change look like for that representation that we all are talking about now?
Well, first thing, for that type of change to happen, Africa needs to recruit many countries outside of Africa to back it for change. There's already partnership, definitely. Partnership, definitely. This is something that Africa can't do alone. It needs to recruit other nations that see a lot of value in increasing African representation in institutions like the United Nations. And I think Turkey is probably at the head of them because the Turkish president has constantly voiced his opinion that there needs to be an African country on the United Nations Security Council. That besides just recruiting a country like Turkey, you need many other countries together. You need to recruit countries across the global south, countries across Latin America, and you need to be able to put forth a very realistic and very feasible plan of who would be candidates, how much the Security Council needs to be expanded by. And I think this is something that can be done very realistically. There's also the G4 nations inside the United Nations who consistently work on trying to amend the United Nations. I believe those countries are Japan, Brazil, Germany, one other nation right now, I forgot who it was, but there needs to be a lot of coordination with the G4 nations as well inside the United Nations. And a realistic roadmap needs to be prepared. This has to go beyond rhetoric. From now, we've seen rhetoric. We've seen people verbally say, oh, we'll support an African country as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, but this needs to be put into writing. Somebody needs to lead this charge. The African Union probably will play a very important role in this to be a cohesive and singular voice for Africa. And it needs to go forward. It needs to pressure United Nations Security Council members, because at the end of the day, these are the countries that can veto the entrance of a country like
Absolutely.
Africa.
Absolutely. I see Quinter and Suleiman nodding all the way. So I'm going to let them jumping on this point quickly. I'll start with Quinter. Go on, jump in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Desewa. I would like to, first of all, appreciate the remarks that have been made by Yusuf. And I'm very much in agreement, for Africans to jump in on, apparatus that are already functioning. But I'm also curious because we always say, charity begins at home. Mm-hmm. And when we look at what is happening at home, it is a lot of horror stories. And I believe sometimes Africa also needs to identify solutions that are relevant for African problems. When you look at what is ailing us in terms of, our strive for equality and fairness and justice, there are many issues that we are looking at. We are looking at, poverty. How is it that a very small percentage, I think 0.0001 of, the wealth of the entire continent is distributed among 3 people, as, about 50% of the population is languishing in poverty? For me, that puzzles me. How is it that here in Africa, we have girls who are still not going to school because of our patriarchal attitudes, because we think that it's still not profitable it's more profitable to have boy children in school than girls. How is it possible that in this loving continent of ours, we still have millions, hundreds of millions of girls still going through outdated cultures such as, FGM and early childhood marriage? I fail to understand how we can allow ourselves to go through some of these retrogressive cultures, yet we want to think global. How do we deal with our homegrown harmful cultures first before we even start looking east, west, or south, or wherever? How do we manage that? And how is it that it is only in Africa where leaders hold on to power till there are countries in this continent of ours where people have only known one president since they were born? For 30 years, 40 years, we still have the same old, leaders and presidents holding on to power. We are dealing with corruptions, billions of money. I think about over $80 billion being lost to corruption, money that could have been wired elsewhere to improve our situations. How then do we hope that other people will come on board to help us solve our problems? So for me, I'm more into looking at internally. How do we ensure that we have laws and policies that are progressive for us? How do we ensure that education, which is the door to many opportunities, how do we ensure that our education systems, we have education reforms, ensuring that in the 21st century, nobody fails to go to school? How are we still dealing with literacy issues in Africa? So my point is, let us look inward. Let us start asking ourselves the tough questions. We are Africans, we have leaders. Some of us have been colonized, others haven't. I'll give you an example. If you look at the progress that Ethiopia has made, for example, despite not being colonized, despite being probably one of the poorest countries many years ago, and right now the progress that they have made. Look at Rwanda, even after going through the genocide, they have managed to make much progress. So for me, I think that if Africa wants to make progress, Africa can make progress. The choice is actually ours, but we have to make very radical decisions. We have to come up with very radical laws. We have to be very intentional about our idea of equality and fairness. We have to, for one last time, can we stop talking about patriarchy? We have seen the gains that countries and organizations that front for gender equality. We've seen the gains that they have made. There's even statistics that show that where there's gender equality, there is progress. We saw it during the COVID-19 pandemic. The states and the countries that were managed by women did fairly well. So how much more do we need? What more evidence do we need for us to embrace, equality and fairness? So let us look inwardly. Let us see, as we elect leaders, say to government, what qualities are we electing? Are we, caught up in the euphoria of parties and tribe and religion at the expense of our own progress? I feel Africa can, first of all, look at their own solutions before we even look outwards. Thank you.
This is a very, very important point that you have pointed out, and I've heard in many of the forums that I have moderated or posted, however you like. I keep hearing that, one of the things that will fix that equality that we're looking at in the international community is Africa's need to strengthen the democratic process that allows for the fair share of resources. And as long as, within itself, it can solve or at least fix some of these issues, then it will continue to then start the process of positioning itself in the international community. Otherwise, it's very easy to divide the region. It's very easy to distract the leaders, and then before you know it, they're dealing so much with internal issues that there isn't enough time or resources left to then deal with the external, which is Africa's place in the international community. So I totally hear you well, Quintia. Let me let my wonderful friend Suleiman jump in, because I also saw you wanted to add a few points.
I think I quite agree to a large extent about partnership, and we're not in we're not running out of partnerships. The partnerships are already there. We have the US Africa Summit, we have the UK Africa Summit, we have the EU Africa Summit, the Chinese Africa Summit, the Turkish Africa Summit. But at the end of the day, the question will be asked is, what kind of good comes to the people, away from the government, away from the politicians, away from the elected official who is or away from the key business persons. Now, it comes back to some of the key things. When we talk about inequality, we should also talk about resources. We should talk about inequality in health, inequality in education, because we've gone beyond looking at sex or gender. Now we're looking at how we have been able to apportion resources. And so far, corruption is the bane. Yes, corruption comes in. And that is why the inequality.
Suleiman, can I ask you, can I quickly come in here again?
Yeah, go ahead.
As the devil's advocate, as they would say. Wait a minute. The last time I checked, there's corruption everywhere in the world. It's just perhaps the corruption in Africa is very raw, which means there's money seen exchanged. It is everywhere. It is in the American system. It is in Latin America. It is in everywhere I have managed to read about. It has just taken different forms. So is corruption really the problem?
Yes, corruption
Or
is the
should I say
problem.
is the problem exclusive to Africa?
No. Corruption is a problem. And the corruption in Africa is, unprecedented. The corruption in Africa is the kind of corruption, if you have 2% of such corruption in Europe and in America, the countries will go down. Nigeria or Africa, the continent is so blessed. I mean, look at the war in Congo. We're talking about cobalt. Till today, nobody's talking about the thievery, the pilfering.
All right, we're having issues again with connecting to Suleiman. I'm sure he's going to come up.
We're talking about batteries. You're talking so many things that the world needs today is from cobalt. People are running away from it. I see that it looks like my internet is unstable. I hope you can still hear me. So yeah, these are some of the key things. So when we come back to Africa, we're having these partnerships. One of the key things is are these partners also helping to fight these thieves who are bringing the same resources that is causing or that are causing the inequality on the continent. For instance, if you have a company, a corporate body that is stealing from maybe Congo, and you're taking it to another country, maybe in Europe or America or Asia, and these same people tell you that they are partners in progress, are they helping to fight back these thieves or these people who are causing some destructive inequality? The answer, I'll leave it there. So listening to Yusuf has painted a picture. These partnerships, we need them. But again, it goes beyond having the partnership that may not work. Are we talking about partnerships that work, partnership that we see, that we genuinely believe that truly we're looking at a world where we all would say whatever happens in Turkey could also happen to me here in Nigeria and happen to Quintia, who is in, for instance, in Kenya? Are we thinking in that direction, or are we thinking of causing some deliberate inequality in one part of the world so that that part of the world will continue to be subservient? These are some key concerns.
Let me come in here. This is so interesting. I'm having a great time. About 2 decades now, the Turkish foreign policy towards Africa has been win-win partnership, win-win situation. Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has also been at the forefront of advocating for, has always been asking, look, the world is bigger than 5. How do we make this world a better place humanitarian-wise, in terms of development, etc. And if any of you, I'm sure both of you have noticed how the influence of Turkey is increasing on the continent. And there are many reasons for that. Yeah, I can see both of you nodding. So my question then would be to the both of you, I'll start with Quintia, is how about the Turkey-Africa partnership, and how can Turkey work with the continent to make the world a fairer place, to help perhaps even deal, if possible, with some of the stuff that you have raised? Remember, it's a partnership, it's not a lordship, because that's what the Turkey partnership, the policy is, like it's a win-win situation. So go on, Quintia.
Thank you so much, Adewa. I think we have highlighted, my co-panelists have highlighted some of the issues, some of the problems that Africa is grappling with, including poor leadership, corruption, the inequalities in education, economic empowerment, patriarchal barriers, etc. I think for me, any partnership that is mutually beneficial needs to assess the reality on the ground. What is the reality on the ground for Africa? And what is the reality on the ground for Turkey? And in terms of our realities as Africans, I think our problems are already out there. So how then can Turkey come in? How does it plug in to ensure that we are on the same page? So first and foremost, I think we have to look at our foreign policies from different countries. What foreign policies are aligned to, say, for example, Kenya's foreign policies, are they aligned to Turkey's foreign policies? And where are the areas where we can connect, and how can we benefit each other, to the maximum? It's unfortunate that Turkey, for example, was recently hit by the earthquake. And that gives us an example that no country can stand on its own at any given time. So for us, it's all about looking at our current needs, our current realities, and finding a way where we can plug in. Different countries came on board, different organizations came on board to their aid. And that is what I'm looking at case by case situation, looking at country by country situation. Where are we bleeding, and where do we need help? And I think this is where this is how a great partnership looks like, where we all feel like we have met somewhere in the middle, where our values are aligned, and where we can work together for the mutual benefit of everyone. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I see the principle behind what you just said. I'll let Sulaiman come in here before I go to Yusuf.
I think there's no denying the fact that there's some kind of robust, and this is not to curry any, there's no denying the fact that there's some kind of incursion made by the Turkey, into Africa. They're doing quite a number of things for the continent. And that's why it will lead me to the question of, first, is Turkey also looking at treating its citizens the same way it is
We're losing you again, Sulaiman. Hopefully he comes back in a few seconds. If not, let me
In,
go
in,
to,
in,
okay, you're back again. We've lost you like a couple of times today already.
oh, I apologize.
So,
And I also,
so press pause and play again. Back to
Oh,
that
my.
line of thought because we lost it. So you're gonna have to go back in.
Okay,
Fast
okay. I started by saying that Turkey has to, first show that it is able to treat its citizens the same way it is treating Africans or any other citizen, and also those Africans who have been educated in Turkey, and some of them who are entrepreneurs in Turkey, are they also looking at how they can help these genuine people come to Africa or lead them in coming to Africa to also bring to Africa such kind of development that they talk about. So I understand that we need, a lot of other. I hate to use the word world powers, yeah, because it looks like you're trying to suppress someone. Otherwise, Turkey and so many other countries to become world powers. The more, as I say, the merrier. World powers in not oppressing any country, but in trying to see how you can move in to help that country or that continent with the sole aim of thinking and believing that we are one world. So once you start thinking that look at what COVID taught us. Whatever happens somewhere ultimately happened in my local village somewhere in Africa, everyone was scared. So it tells us a picture that truly we're all together, we're all in it to succeed or to fail. So by so doing, we must genuinely show cause that whatever we're doing in one part of the world will ultimately be the same, with the same standard, with the same amount of zest and zeal, pursuit and belief in another part of the world. In this case, we're talking about Africa, because we have a lot of Africans, and I'm sure, Adesha, you also know, we have a lot of Africans who have this, negative beliefs, and also who are always, thinking that whoever is coming from outside Africa is coming to exploit you. We've seen it with vaccines. As important as vaccines, some people will sit somewhere and tell you that, look, they're coming to make you infertile. They're coming to make you, to depopulate you. Don't take this vaccine. So we need to actually bring those people, especially Africans in diaspora, to be a part of these people who will be making that, audacious move into the continent. Because once you see one of your own amongst these people, perhaps those you already know, you say, okay, I know this person, I know this gentleman, this is a man of honor, this is a woman of honor. It becomes so easy for you to sell that, principle of equality, principle of justice and fairness, of ultimately making our world a better world.
Right, great stuff. Okay, this is where I'm going to ask you, Sue. Paint us a picture of Turkey's concept of a win-win situation, and what a fairer world in that scope looks like.
Well, first of all, I want to say it was tremendously productive listening to my two colleagues speak. And I definitely understand their concerns and desire for domestic changes in both of their countries and throughout the continent. But I don't think that Africa's ambitions should ever just be about domestic change either. I think that this has to be a dual track towards advancement, where African countries work towards bettering themselves domestically, but they should never give up on their ambition or the real prize, which is to make their voices heard globally and have a seat on every single global institution where they are part of the decision-making apparatus. And I think that that domestic instability sometimes can cause you to try to fix problems at home and forget about the true goals also on the global stage. So I think that that's something that should be run simultaneously. Now, whenever we talk about a fairer world, since it's since it's not a tangible concept, since it's not a point A to a point B, we can get lost in the process of how we try to achieve it. But I think, and we've talked about this before in one of my previous answers, where I said, well, Africa needs to recruit more partners. I think first and foremost, the first step needs to be who would represent Africa on the United Nations Security Council as its first permanent African member. I think that's something that the African Union should sit down and decide. I think if we have a candidate country first, so we know everybody knows who they're backing, I think that would be a first step. I think the second step should be setting a date for this goal. When does the world, or when does this group that's working together, not just Africa, but Africa and its partners that really want to get this done, not rhetorically, but really want to achieve this, what is the date they hope to achieve this by? Maybe 2023 sounds like a good date. 2023, there are many goals for the United Nations. Many countries have their own domestic goals set for 2023. I think that would be a nice date. So for example, Nigeria or South Africa, probably the two countries most poised to be on the Security Council. Let's say the African Union signals one of them and says, this would be the candidate country that the African Union wants to see. And then we set a date, 2023, let's say. Mission 2023, carry this African nation as a permanent member to the Security Council. Once we start getting tangible dates, tangible goals, tangible targets to reach, I think building a roadmap around that is so much better than just coming together and say, hey, let's make a fairer world possible, because you really can't gauge your level of success or level of advancement towards your goal until you have realistic targets, realistic goals inside of that roadmap. So the building of the roadmap is very important. I think this is something that Turkey will always be ready to help Africa with. I think Turkey has a very important voice inside the United Nations. I think it has a group of countries that it works very closely together with outside of Africa that would be willing to back an African seat on the United Nations Security Council. And I think Africa also has sincere partners outside of the continent as well that they can work with. So when we put all of this effort, all of this influence together, and once you do have a roadmap with solid information, solid data that you can begin to recruit supporters inside of a bigger block, I think then that's a road and a recipe to success.
That is an amazing point that you have made. Basically, Africa, fix local, but dream global. Okay.
Definitely.
I'm going to now go to my final word, because if you leave me at it, I'm having a good time, but we have to wrap it up. So I'm going to start with Suleiman Alade, your final word as we wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Quinta, Yusuf, Adeshola. My final word here, listening to all of us, I've come to the conclusion that what we need is a symbiotic relationship. Africa needs the world. There are things that Africa can also give to the world. So Africa should also start looking at and making that relationship show that truly they also can give to the world, just as the world can also give to Africa.
Amazing. Quinta? Quinta, your turn. Your final word. You're muted, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Adewa. Thank you, Suleiman. Thank you, Yusuf. And Suleiman just removed the words off my mouth.
Great minds think alike.
I know, as my final thoughts, I feel like it's about time for Africa has so much to give in terms of resources, in terms of manpower, in terms of brains. I think it's time for Africa to reclaim Africa's glory, because what we have compared to probably what everyone has is way much more. So we just need to put on our big girl or big boy pants and take up our space. We need to stop relying so much on foreign aid. We need to stop relying so much on getting assistance and being helped to do things that we can actually do on our own. So maybe we need to, it's just a matter of reaching our self-actualization as a continent, because I feel like we have so much potential that is yet to be tapped. So Africa, arise. I think that is my final word.
Wonderful. And then let's ask Yusuf Arim as we wrap it up. Your final word.
I think you said it best when solve the domestic problems, but always think global. I think Africa is a tremendous power. I think, but first Africans need to realize that first. There are countries outside of Africa that realize that. I think the Africans, not just the leaders, the understanding that you're proud, that you're strong, and that you have a lot to offer needs to trickle down into society. And once it trickles down into society, I think a lot of problems will be solved going forward. But the world needs a lot of leadership. Africans need good leadership as well. And inside of that leadership should always be global ambitions, definitely not just local ambitions. And I think that one of the problems that Africa has had in the past is instability in many countries. And I understand how instabilities can take you off of that roadmap, but always never forget that there needs to be a roadmap, and X marks the spot, and X should be more power and more representation on the global stage. So when African leaders do communicate with their counterparts in other countries, they should always not just have a local agenda, but also have a global agenda, and see who really is sincere in working with African nations. Are those that only want bilateral interests met, talking with them, or are there leaders who really want to work together with the continent? And I think that should separate Africa's partners from one another, so they understand who they can really walk with going forward.
Absolutely. And just to cap it up, especially in the last 3 decades, a lot of local ambitions have been influenced by the global nature of our world now. Globalization is driving the many decisions and policies that leaders everywhere are making. So I think it's very important to continue to look inward, but also to be very conversant of what is happening around us in the world, because there is no longer space. There is no longer distance. We're all together and we're shaping each other's ambitions as we go forward. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Quintin Bori, a gender equality advocate and first president of the Standard Group Women Network, for joining us this wonderful Sunday. And also Quintin Yusuf Arim, TRT World's editor-at-large and Turkish foreign policy expert. It's been a pleasure having you on this panel. And last but not the least, Sulaiman Alade, a global affairs analyst, editor-at-large, and strategic media and communications consultant. It has been my pleasure to host you on this panel. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you somewhere in the world, I guess. Thank you.